The arrival of the local constabulary did little to inspire confidence. The man who presented himself as Constable Davies was a portly, red-faced individual with an air of self-importance that was directly at odds with his obvious lack of intellectual acuity. He bustled into the greenhouse, his chest puffed out, his notebook at the ready, clearly relishing the opportunity to be involved in a case of such magnitude at a noble estate. He seemed, however, more interested in the grandeur of his surroundings than in the grim reality of the crime that had been committed. A terrible business indeed, he declared, his voice booming in the humid air. To think of it, a man struck down in his prime, right here at Blackwood Manor. Do not you worry, my lady, he added, turning to Lady Harrington with a clumsy attempt at a reassuring smile. Constable Davies is on the case. We shall leave no stone unturned. Holmes, who had been standing in quiet contemplation, turned to the constable with an expression of polite, almost deferential interest. "It is a great relief to have you here, Constable," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "The responsibility of this affair is a heavy one, and I should be glad to place the matter in your capable hands. I am merely a visitor here, a humble student of human nature. My friend Dr. Watson has already made a preliminary examination of the deceased, and I have taken the liberty of securing a small item of evidence which may or may not be of some significance. I would, of course, be happy to share my observations with you." It was a masterful performance. Holmes, with his carefully chosen words of flattery and deference, was subtly taking control of the investigation, manipulating the bumbling constable into a position of willing subservience. Davies, his ego inflated by Holmes's praise, puffed out his chest even further and nodded sagely. Of course, he said. "Any assistance you can provide will be most welcome, Mr. Holmes. I have heard of your, unusual methods. Pray, tell me what you have observed." And so, under the guise of assisting the official investigation, Holmes began his own far more rigorous analysis of the crime scene. He moved with the slow, deliberate precision of a scientist in his laboratory, his eyes missing nothing. He began with the ground itself, studying the soft, loamy earth with an intensity that seemed almost obsessive. He pointed out the footprints of the deceased, the faint impressions of his own shoes, and the deeper, more frantic tracks left by Miss Vance when she had fled in terror. "Observe, Constable," he said, his voice a low, instructional murmur. "The ground here is soft, yet there are no other footprints around the body. No sign of a struggle, no indication that another person was present at the time of death. The killer, if there is a killer, was either as light as a phantom, or did not need to approach his victim to strike the fatal blow." He then turned his attention to the body of Alistair Finch. While I had conducted a medical examination, Holmes's focus was on the minutiae, the tiny details that would escape a less observant eye. He used his powerful magnifying glass to inspect the victim's fingernails, the fabric of his coat, the soles of his shoes. He spent a great deal of time examining Finch's hands, turning them over and over with a gentle, almost reverent touch. "Interesting," he murmured, more to himself than to the constable. "The victim's hands are clean, yet there is a small, reddish-brown stain on the cuff of his right sleeve. It is not blood. It appears to be some sort of sap or resin. And look here, Watson, he said, turning to me. There is a tiny, almost invisible scratch on the back of his hand, just below the knuckle. It is fresh, but it is not bleeding. He then produced a silver cufflink he had found earlier. I discovered this in the soil near the victim's hand, he explained to the constable. It is not his. I observed his own cufflinks at dinner last night. They were simple gold ovals. This, as you can see, is a far more elaborate design. A serpent eating its own tail. The Ouroboros, an ancient symbol of eternity and rebirth. A curious object to find at the scene of a potential murder, is it not? Constable Davies, who had been struggling to keep up with Holmes's rapid-fire deductions, simply nodded, his brow furrowed in a comical expression of profound concentration. He dutifully made a note in his book, though I suspected he understood little of the significance of what he was being told. Having concluded his examination of the immediate crime scene, Holmes then began a slow, methodical tour of the entire greenhouse. He studied the various plants, the complex irrigation system, the state of the tools on the potting bench. He seemed particularly interested in the air quality, sniffing the humid atmosphere like a bloodhound on the scent. The air is thick with the scent of blossoms, he remarked. But there is another fainter odor beneath it all, something sharp, almost chemical. Do you not detect it, Watson? I inhaled deeply. He was right. Beneath the heavy, sweet perfume of the flowers, there was a faint, almost imperceptible chemical tang. It was a scent that was both familiar and strangely out of place in this temple of nature. By the time Holmes had completed his tour, Constable Davies was looking thoroughly bewildered. He had filled several pages of his notebook with scribbled, disjointed observations, but it was clear that he had no coherent theory of the crime. He was a man adrift in a sea of data, without the intellectual compass to find his way to shore. It was at this point that Holmes, with a masterful display of feigned humility, offered his own preliminary hypothesis. It is, of course, merely a theory, Constable, he said, his voice a low, confidential whisper. But it seems to me that we are not dealing with a common case of assault or murder. The lack of any physical evidence of a struggle, the peaceful expression on the victim's face, the absence of any weapon. It all points to a more subtle, more insidious method of killing. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. I believe, he continued, his voice dropping even lower, that Mr. Finch was the victim of a poison, a rare, perhaps even unknown poison, derived from one of the exotic plants in this very greenhouse, a poison so potent that it kills almost instantly, leaving no trace save for a faint chemical odor in the air and a tiny, almost invisible scratch on the victim's hand. The theory was so audacious, so dramatic, that it left us all speechless. Constable Davies stared at Holmes, his mouth agape, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The idea of a poison derived from a flower, of a murder committed with the silent, deadly weapon of nature itself, was something straight out of a penny dreadful novel. And yet, as Holmes presented it, with his calm, logical precision, it seemed not only plausible, but almost certain. Having planted this seed in the constable's mind, Holmes then suggested that the next logical step would be to search the victim's personal quarters. Mr. Finch was a man of science, a man of letters, he said. It is possible that he kept a journal, a record of his research. Such a document might contain some clue as to the nature of his work, or perhaps even a hint as to any enemies he might have made. Davies, eager to be seen as taking decisive action, readily agreed. He dispatched one of his men to stand guard at the greenhouse, and then, with an air of great importance, led the way back to the manor. Finch's room was on the same floor as our own. It was a modest, yet comfortable chamber, filled with the paraphernalia of a traveling scholar. Books on botany were piled high on the desk, and pressed flowers lay between the pages of heavy-looking volumes. His clothes were neatly folded in a trunk at the foot of the bed, and a collection of pipes lay in a neat row on the mantelpiece. It was the room of a man who was both tidy and studious, a man of quiet intellectual habits. While the constable conducted a rather clumsy and superficial search, Holmes moved about the room with a quiet, focused intensity. He did not open drawers or rifle through papers. Instead, he seemed to be absorbing the atmosphere of the room, trying to understand the man who had inhabited it. He ran his fingers over the spines of the books, studied the photographs on the wall, examined the contents of the waste paper basket. It was I who found it. Tucked away at the back of a desk drawer, beneath a pile of seemingly innocuous receipts, was a small, leather-bound ledger. It was a handsome volume, its cover embossed with the victim's initials, A.F., and it was locked. "Well done, Watson," Holmes said, his eyes gleaming as he took the ledger from my hand. "This may be the very thing we are looking for." He examined the lock, a small, intricate brass mechanism. "A simple lock," he murmured, "but one that would deter a casual snooper. It seems our Mr. Finch had a secret." Constable Davies, seeing the ledger, immediately puffed out his chest and extended his hand. "Evidence," he declared. "It must be taken to the station and examined by the proper authorities." Holmes smiled, a thin, almost predatory smile. "Of course, Constable," he said, handing the ledger over. "But I should be very careful with it if I were you. A man who goes to the trouble of locking his journal may have secrets that are worth killing for. And a killer who has struck once is very likely to strike again, especially if he believes his secrets are in danger of being revealed." The constable's face paled, and he held the ledger as if it were a venomous snake. The thought that he was now in possession of an object that could make him the killer's next target had clearly not occurred to him. With the discovery of the locked ledger, the first phase of the investigation came to a close. Constable Davies, looking flustered and overwhelmed, announced that he would return to the station to file his report and secure the evidence. He left 2 of his men to guard the manor, with strict instructions that no one was to leave. As soon as the constable had departed, Holmes turned to me, his eyes burning with a fierce intellectual fire. "The first thread, Watson," he said, his voice a low, excited hum. "We have found the first thread, and if we pull on it, I'm confident that the entire tangled tapestry of this affair will begin to unravel." He began to pace the room, his mind working at a furious pace. A man is murdered in a greenhouse filled with exotic plants. The cause of death is a mysterious poison that leaves no trace. The only clue is a cryptic cufflink and a locked journal. The inhabitants of the house are a nervous, secretive lord, a cold, imperious lady, and a sad, beautiful ward. It is a classic puzzle, Watson, a symphony of secrets and lies. He paused and looked at me. a grim smile playing on his lips. Our killer is an intelligent and audacious individual. They have used a weapon that is both brilliant and diabolical. They have committed a murder that is, to all intents and purposes, the perfect crime. But they have made one mistake. They have underestimated their opponent. They believe they are safe, that their secret is secure. But they are wrong. For I am here, Watson, and I will not rest until I have brought them to justice. His words sent a shiver down my spine. The game was indeed afoot, and the stakes were higher than I could have imagined. We were no longer just solving a crime. We were hunting a killer, a cold, calculating adversary who had turned a thing of beauty into a weapon of death. And as Holmes paced the floor, his mind already racing ahead, I knew that we were on a path that would lead us deeper into the heart of darkness, a path from which there could be no turning back. The first thread had been pulled, and the web of Blackwood Manor was beginning to tremble.